general rules are, get started when you plant it, keep following. Your young trees you'll prune pretty lightly. You've got some time to play, and you don't want to take too much of your leaf production out because that's what's driving the growth of your tree. So you can wait on some of these a year or 2 or 3 till you see what is happening, because what looked like not a very good branch one year, the next year fills out nicely and is laying right where you want it, and you go, gosh, I'm glad I didn't cut that off. Better to be safe than sorry. Go ahead and fudge on the safe side. You do have another year. 5 years is another story, but 1 year you got lots of room to reconsider. Just once you've made that cut, it's done. Your decision is made. But you can look at that and go, okay, I'm going to wait and see where that goes, because I can cut it next year if I need to. Or, and here's the one a lot of you may be dealing with, is you pruned it out really nice. It's right where you want to be, and the moose came through.
Oh, yeah.
And now you're back to square one, and you don't know what you're going to do. So, other than shoot the moose. If we've got a tree that is in good shape, then an older tree, we want to go lightly on the bottom. We're going to get rid of those hangers, and you think you got them all, the next year it's like, where did all those come from? So you're going to kind of, anything that's hanging down directly under the limb, we need to get rid of, because even if it sets fruit, it's not in the sun, it's just a mess all the time. Plus, you have to wear a hat in the tree or you're going to rip your scalp apart. So we prune those up. The higher in the tree we go, the more heavily we prune, because we've got all these things coming, and these are primarily coming in that crown, in the top. So we've got our main branches. We're just going to maintain our fruiting centers and allow new laterals to form on them. Keep them stubbed back a little. Remember, a standard fruit tree with a 12-foot height can have a 40-foot spread on those big old lateral limbs. Yeah, from side to side, not just on one side, but it's not unusual at all to have a 20-foot limb out there on that. Yeah.
That's what I was asking. I just wanted to hear that for sure that I heard it right.
Yeah. Yeah, they can cover a lot of area. That's why they were planted quite a ways apart on centers, because they were going to let those those scaffold limbs spread out. Okay. With our semi-dwarf and dwarf, they're back down reasonable, but I planted a Honeycrisp 3 years ago, and that thing is already probably 16 feet from side to side. And I was looking at it today going, oh man, I got to get this thing under control. All right.
On a 40-foot span, what's the root system look like?
The root system of any tree is pretty much the same as the limb spread. Now this is, if you're talking conifers in the forest, if you're talking fruit trees, ornamentals, they go to the drip line. And that's pretty much standard. Some of them, cottonwood is one that'll send those runners out for 150 feet, but
so in an orchard where they're planted 10 feet apart, the root system has got to be looking like this underneath, right?
Yeah, you get root grafting, you get one feeding another, but the forests are the same thing. They are quite an entity when you really get into the forestry of it, the silviculture. It's not one tree, it's one giant organism. And they're all interconnected. Just an aside, has nothing to do with pruning class. Point of interest. In some of the lodgepole stands, when they get pine beetle infestations, if it starts on one side, before the beetles get across the stand, the trees on the far edge are already producing the enzymes to try to fight those beetles. And it's all through root grafting. And the word gets spread. It's
Pretty amazing.
almost disturbing in some ways. Okay.
What
Over
about
the years,
feeding these trees?
our one apple tree has
Just a
produced
second.
big redwoods, and they're solid, really good. This year, they're about half size, and they're misshapen,
Yeah,
and they're ugly.
yeah. They've got scab on them. The scab cracked. This was a horrible apple year in this area. I have the same thing with mine. My Honeycrisp apple last year, I had probably 3 bushel baskets off a new tree of nice big apples. This year I got maybe 7 or 8 nice big apples and a half a bushel of uglies.
Yeah, we got 3 or 4 big ones, and then the rest of them are all those.
Yeah.
I thought
It's environmental. It's the spring and that.
on the trunk, I've discovered a huge split that went down to the wood, through the bark.
Yeah,
And it looked like it was starting to curl back in, so it's been there for a little while.
yeah. Which side was it on?
Northwest.
Could be a frost crack. It could be what happens with fruit trees, especially, and that's why we like to put the guard on them or paint them. The sun hits them in the winter. They heat up. It actually thaws the moisture in the cambium layer, and then it freezes at night and splits that bark. So we try to protect them from the sun. White latex paint. Or just the tree wraps. They work too. And those have the added advantage of protecting against voles. Nothing worse than having a tree 3 or 4 years old that's really doing good and gets girdled by voles. Yes.
We had a sapsucker attack our crabapple tree, and I couldn't imagine what all those little holes were. Oh, and I don't know how in the world to keep that little booger out of there.
410 works.
I have something that works if you want to try it. You know that stretchy bandage stuff that you use on your horses?
Yeah.
I wrapped the trunk of my tree with this.
Do you leave it on for a
I
long
do, and in the wintertime it hardens up and it peels right off in the wintertime.
Okay, there you go. I got a bunch of that.
If this is an aside from the pruning, if you put a wrap of some sort on your tree and check it periodically, codling moth caterpillars climb down the trunk and they will stop and hide under that. You can wrap a burlap sack around it or anything like this and you can catch them. And
What does a codling moth caterpillar look like?
well, don't know. They're the ones that come out of our apples. So the life cycle of the codling moth, they climb down the tree, they get into the dirt, they pupate, they become a moth, they fly up, lay their eggs, those eggs hatch, they go in through the stem or the blossom end, most usually the blossom end of the fruit, go into the seed cavity, feed on seeds. Then they have the indignity of coming out the side like alien. Crawl back down the tree into the dirt where they pupate, and they do this approximately 3 times in a season. That's why it's so hard to protect our trees against codling moth. Okay, so we're jumping around.
What about feeding those trees?
Feeding helps. Feeding is good.
What do you use?
Well, just a good compost. You know, it's really easy to overfeed, and you can tell if you're overfeeding because you get a whole bunch of these things really going, and they get too big. I mean, those grow, instead of maybe 3 feet, they grow 7. I've got plum trees are real bad around here. Not the old Italian prune, but the actual like Shiro plum or something like this. They'll put out 7-8 feet of new growth on a sucker.
Really?
And that is this size. And when you look at these are 6 feet and no bigger than they are. You know, that is no good for anything.
Mom used to whip me with that.
Yeah, that is a good selling point on me, isn't it?
Borrow those.
Okay.
I have a Macintosh that's a couple years old. It produced last year. This year an elk got in it, ripped it all up. Doesn't look very healthy at all. The tree itself, but it has some pieces coming out from the bottom. They're only about this big. There's about 4 of them. I'm scared to pull it because it's all this little
Okay,
tree.
what you need to do is look closely at where they're at. Okay, all of our trees, whether they're on standard rootstock, dwarf, semi-dwarf, they're all grafted. You can't grow an apple from seed and have it come true. So it has to be grafted to get the type you want. So you look at that, and there will be a place there where you'll see something's been cut off and this other one grows past it. That's where it was grafted. If the suckers are below the graft, they're the rootstock. It's not going to do you any good at all unless you save one of those and graft onto it.
Okay.
If it's above the graft, then you can start over.
Okay.
Either have 2 or 3 come up or pick out the best one and let that become your new tree. Let it grow for another year, then cut the old trunk out and let it heal over that. The trouble with pruning is I can tell you all the things to do, but doesn't do any good because every tree is different. So it becomes more of an art than a technical exercise. And so you're looking for balance. You're looking at aesthetics. I'm sure if it's a home orchard, we don't want something that looks like those rows and rows of things tied to wires at Wenatchee and Yakima. We want something that's actually attractive in our yard or even in our orchard. And so we like to use these basic guidelines to get where we want to be. And that's a tree that looks nice, that produces well for us, and that we can service. Whether it's picking fruit, whether it's thinning fruit, whether it's putting something on that tree to try to protect the fruit. And there's things we can do, and I won't go into that at all, but there's things we can do for these pests, whether they're fungus or whether they're insects. Some are organic, some are inorganic, but a tree like on our field trip out here, there's not much we can do to protect that tree from pests. If we spray it, the spray is intercepted by the outermost layer of branches, doesn't get to the others simply continue with what they're doing. One of the reasons to prune is to get airflow that will allow your tree to dry after the rains. You don't have the fungus attacks, the rusts, the scab that we fight all the time. I mean, it'll be there, but not so severely because it dries out. We can then spray our tree with something if we want to, and we can get all of it. But we have to have those open areas where we can get at. And then in the fall, we've got, they even say in this book from the Northwest Extension Service, ladder bays. You open it up enough so you can stick a ladder right into the tree. Now I have fruit ladders. They're three-legged ladders, but you have to throw that single leg out. Well, if you make some fruit bays, you can, and you can pick right into the center of the tree without any problems. This tree out here, there's no way I can lean an extension ladder against it and try to get at it. But it's all in getting that tree shaped, opened up. If we open it up, not only can it dry and get airflow, it gets sunlight. The fruit we set, let's say we've got 50 to 75% fewer branches. Let's say 75% fewer branches. We will get 75% more quality fruit on 25% of the wood. Don't hold me to that. I made those figures up. But it kind of falls in that range. You're going to get bigger fruit, you're going to get better quality, and it'll be just a lot nicer all the way around. Training and pruning your home orchard. And this is the new rendition of it, and that's just the way this one's been printed. It's the same one I've got. This was a few years ago. It's just a few pages. 15 pages. 14 pages. And it covers the ground I've covered, and then it goes into specifics on different types of fruit. Cherries, plums, prunes. You're just going to prune those enough to facilitate dealing with the tree, because they have long-lived fruiting spurs, and if they're given half a chance, they will produce enough fruit to break limbs. Some of the apples, different story, and as I said earlier, peaches, apricots, 1 year, and they're going to prune those out. Let the next year, pardon?
Nectarines too?
They don't say so, but I assume they're all the same. So that's what we're playing with. This is a very good book. This is the one I would recommend. I have others. The Sunset books, they put out a good pruning book. And HP. I have a few others. They're all the same thing. Now you go through them, and they have these line pictures with little slash marks where you cut this limb off and this limb off, and my eyes cross after a while. But it's really good to have, and they go into a lot of stuff. Like, I've concentrated on fruit trees. Okay, there's berries. All our ornamentals, whether it's trees or whether it's flowering shrubs or just shrubs. Pruning is important to all of these. And there's kind of a universal thing as we watch, is whether you've got a shrub type honeysuckle You got an old shrub rose. All of these things, they grow up. A couple of years later, they start to spread over, and then they fall down. And so a continuous pruning on them is to come underneath and prune that old stuff out and let the new stuff keep coming.